Allora cominceremo. Pronto? Sì. Allora, buongiorno, benvenuti a questo incontro, a questa lezione. Mi dicono che l'incontro verrà trasmesso in streaming e quindi mi hanno pregato di fare questa presentazione in inglese, cosa che mi accingo a fare, quindi passo all'inglese. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome. Shortly, Philippe Grain will give a lecture magistralis titled Sharing and Sostenibilità delle comunità creative and Sustainability of Creative Communities. Before giving the podium to our guest, allow me, as it's usually the case, a few words of introduction and presentation. First of all, I have to declare a conflict of interest. Philippe Grain is a trustee of the Nexus Center for Internet and Society that I co-direct at the Polytechnic of Turin, and is also a friend. I'll do my best, be sure that I will try to avoid that my words will be influenced by these ties with him. As some of you perhaps know, for several years now, I've been trying to understand, together with many other people throughout the world, what is this digital revolution that we are living through. What are the laws of this digital transformation? What are the possible consequences, both positive and negative? Is it possible to influence the evolution of the digital revolution? And if so, how and towards which direction? What happens to culture as we move through the digital? What's the impact on democracy? This is just a very few of the many possible questions that is necessary to pose to avoid that we passively receive this transformation driven only by the interest of a few people. For me, like other people that started in this journey to understand the digital revolution in a more comprehensive manner, I'm a technical person, I started from technology, and I wanted to enlarge my vision. It was almost unavoidable to meet the work and the passion of Philippe Grain, our guest today. 9 years ago, in fact, in 2003, Philippe Grain left the European Commission, where for 7 years in Brussels, he had been working on software, in particular for policies to sustain free software. And he moved back to Paris to create his own company, Open Space, that is a company that develops free software to favor collaboration among citizens and to enable participatory and deliberative democracy. And he, on the side of this professional entrepreneurial activity, he started his thinking and his civil engagement that, in a matter of just a few years, made him as one of the most prominent digital intellectuals, if you allow me, at the international scene. In 2005, Philippe Grain published his first book, Causa Comune, l'informazione tra bene comune e proprietà, Cause Commune, that was brought to Italy by Stampa Alternativa, and it's available online under a Creative Commons license, like all other books and works by Philippe Grain. Just thinking about the title, Causa Comune, Cause Commune, we understand that one of the main points of the thinking and of the proposals of Philippe Grain is the fundamental role that commons, informational commons, beni comuni informazionali, play in the digital society, a theme that he will certainly address during his Lectio Magistralis. After that book, other two books, both important in trying to expand and strengthen our understanding of what it means to produce, elaborate, reuse digital culture. The first one, Internet et Création, 2008, that presented the first concrete proposal to sustain the creation of digital commons, while at the same time legitimizing personal uses. And the third book, Sharing, Culture and the Economy in the Internet Age, which was published just a few months ago by Amsterdam University Press, and it's available online for free, where Philippe Grain strengthens his proposals, refines his proposal, bring it forward, also using empirical data that in the meantime has been made available about the consumption of digital works. Each of these books and also a number of articles and also his blog is a lively and influential blog helped us to better understand what are the challenges regarding digital culture, challenges that in large part we still have to resolve. Let me mention that very recently, just a few days ago, it was published a new work whose main author is Philippe Grain, not the only author, but the main author. It's called Elementi per una riforma del copyright e relative policies culturali. So elements for a copyright reform and related cultural policies, 23 pages of concrete proposals on how to change the system of copyright and in general of the cultural production to make it more in line with the digital age. Besides his thinking, Philippe Grain became quickly an important public intellectual in the sense of his civic role. Actually, if I may make a personal note, the first time that I met Philippe Grain, he doesn't know because we actually didn't talk at the time, but when he stood up at the European Parliament to speak against the proposed directive against software patents, which was happily put in a drawer by the European Parliament a couple of years later. Also in the field of civic engagement, the name of Philippe Grain is well known at the international level. A public intellectual that governments and institutions have to address when we're talking about digital, and in particular about digital culture. It's also thanks to his passion and active involvement that an important non-profit organization, la Quadrature du Net, was founded in 2008, an association that very quickly has become the most visible and active organization in European civil society in sustaining digital civil rights. But let me give you just a brief few biographic information about our speaker. Philippe Grain got his doctorate in computer science from the University of Paris 7, Denis Diderot, in 1991, the habilitation to direct researches. Between 1886 and 96, he led a research group at the Institute for Computer Science Research in Toulouse on multimedia. And between 1996 and 2003, he was, as I mentioned, in Brussels at the European Commission working on software. In 2003, he creates the company Open Space, and in 2008 is one of the founders of la Quadrature du Net. Philippe Grain is also a trustee of the Nexus Center for Internet and Society at the Polytechnic of Turin, and also one of the directors of the Software Freedom Law Center in New York, along other prominent thinkers and activists like Professor Lawrence Lessig and Professor Eben Moglen. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Philippe Grain, to which I, with great happiness, give the word. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. I'm also in conflict of interest, but I will do my best to not believe the praise that because it comes from a friend. Qualche parola in italiano, parlerò inglese, come l'ha detto Juan Carlos, ma voglio ringraziare gli organizzatori, Codici Edizioni e Dunter per invitarmi e posso, se lei vuole fare domande, è possibile di farli in italiano. As Juan Carlos said, my key interest is in the digital world. It lies in how it can enable human and social development. And I say human development first because I believe whatever social development can arise from the digital world is deeply rooted in the development of individuals who participate in it. I don't know this work. One consequence of the fact that the internet and information technology have created a giant laboratory of public expression, of creativity, of communication, of evaluation of what is produced in this world is that you can start with any piece of it, and in each piece you will find the substance and also the dividing lines that you deserve our attention and possibly our action. So I will just very briefly start by one particular domain, which is online writing of literature, fiction, poetry, and its publishing in the digital world. It's actually, I will just briefly describe two extreme cases that you can encounter on how online writing can be, as a social process, organized. The first one is most visible in China, and I'm deeply ignorant of Chinese language and Chinese literature, but good friends of mine speak Chinese and are researchers about it, and I read their works and they explain me how it works. And in China, there is an exceptional growth of online writing that was actually fueled by a form of censorship, in the sense that the Chinese government many years ago outlawed the publishing of a number of literary genres, among which romances, which the Chinese love like many other people, and also some forms of fantasy. And as a result, what individuals started writing their own works, in particular romances, and a big entertainment group called Shanda, S-H-A-N-D-A, which is actually made a fortune in online gaming, saw the opportunity, and they created a big centralized Web 2.0 sites where people can post their literary works. Generally, they do it chapter by chapter. There are more than 1 million authors. China is a big country. Maybe it's not much more in proportion that you find elsewhere. And it's believed that Shengda hosts about 90% of literary writing, online literary writing in China. And because it's a centralized site, it means the people in this context, they interact through the mechanisms that are installed in the site. So this, so this, these links here, they are links internal to the sites, either comments, praise, the recommendation, or whatever. And the operator of the site monitors the access to works, and then when works are successful, they publish them digitally, but also sometimes in paper book. And on the other side, you see an organization of a small literary community in France, which is the most visible one, and I live and write in it. And it's organized completely different manner. That is, the authors, or they will host their their contents on sites that are under their control to a total degree or some degree. In most cases, blogs, either self-hosted blogs, generally using WordPress, or hosted blogs in large services like Blogger or WordPress.com. Also, Tumblr for those who work a lot with photography. The interaction between them is done using social media, predominantly Twitter, They were initially on Facebook, but they moved away. And but also for photography, they will use services like Instagram or the like. But the interesting thing is they don't use the social media part of it. They just use it as a hosting and linking platform. Then there is also publishing, but it's external. It's the community is very much connected with an online journal and with a publishing firm that publishes ebooks, but also paper books. And you have also a large number of individuals who have become critics or aggregators. That is, they consider their task is to spot and promote other authors. And they do so in a manner where the promotion itself is a form of creation. So basically, a lot of what I am saying is, or I am thinking, is trying to explore the drawbacks or benefits of these two extreme models. And it's clear that in the model on the right, you will have an extraordinary inventivity in literary forms, in innovation in the nature of the things that are created. It's also clear that this remains mostly in small groups that are very much federated. They read almost everything that the others are producing or whatever. In contrast, in the Chinese case, which you also find in sites in the UK or Spain, or you have a huge mass, much greater masses of contributors. In France, it's not that they don't exist; they are just in other circles. And this huge mass, from it, a few authors will be promoted towards a large audience. So it's not like I'm saying on one side you have a good thing and on the other side a bad thing, because I believe both will continue to exist. But it's clear that on one side we have, on the Chinese side, we have a kind of continuity of the cultural industry editorial process where the process is just changed in terms of when does the decision occur. The contents are made accessible right away, but the publishing decision comes later. But the type of contents remains sort of similar. While on the other side, you have really a reinvention of the content themselves. Now, let's move away from this and go to what is expected of my talk, and which I will be able to cover only partially. Let's revisit sharing. And what do I mean by sharing? I mean what you are allowed to do with a digital file in your possession, however you obtain it, because you downloaded it, you bought it, or you obtained it for a friend. What can you do with it? And I think there is one object, one technological object that tells us a lot about why it matters, what you can do with it. And this object is this one. It's the paper book. Because this is a paper book I found in my hotel room in Torino. It comes from a wonderful project called Progetto Letteraria Alga. And it's actually a literary competition, but the winners, they get published. And the books are put in many hotel rooms, and you can take them with you, or you can leave them there writing your name on it. But you can give them also to any, like I'm going to do, to anybody who wants. And it's in Italian. So This one is a kind of thriller or detective novel. Anna, do you want it? It's. I think it's good. I mean, I read only 10 pages yesterday evening, but because my reading in Italian is slow. But actually, here the authors and publishers are inciting you to share the book. But even if they don't, it is your right to do so. You can do whatever you want with your book you have bought. You can give it to anybody. And this is not a minority practice. Actually, a printed book has more than 2 readers in average. And so this happened. This happened not per chance. It happened because it serves a purpose. And this purpose is to create a shared culture where it is not the author that decides whether it's going to share or not. It is the use right and the wisdom of readers, in that case, in case of books. So the initiation of my thinking about sharing was simply to ask, but why did we decide that this would not be the case in the digital world? And of course, the reason is simple. It's because in the digital world, you can not only transmit, you can also copy. And that means if you allow this type of sharing to occur, this sharing between individuals without aim of profit, it will develop at a much increased scale. But now, when you have something which is useful, that serves a purpose, and you're faced with the situation where it will develop more, it's a strange decision to decide now we are going to kill it because it's too big. So basically my thinking for the past years was to say, well, how can we live with sharing, non-for-profit sharing between individuals of cultural works, even without the authorization of the author? And one particular reason to do it is that in the digital world, the entry of possession of a file representing a work is a critical step of cultural environment. It is because it gives you the ability to extract whatever you want from it, to quote it, to remix it, to actually to repost it in the case where it fits, its format fits. My empirical work, to which Juan Carlos kindly referred, and the work of many other researchers, has also shown that unauthorized sharing serves a real purpose in terms of enabling access, more diverse access to work. In 2 manners: access to not accessible works by other means, but also in terms of more diversity of access than in the cultural industry world, where a little number of works are heavily promoted in very short life cycles. So if we decide that our answer to the question you see on this slide is that we are going to recognize as a cultural right the possibility for individuals to share works, what can we do about it? But I jump over this. I mean, my slides will be made available on the social media week sites someday under a Creative Commons license. And you will see that was a graph showing the cultural diversity impact, but we don't have time now. If we recognize that this non-for-profit sharing is not actually the main problem that we have within the digital cultural world. Why do I say that? I say that because there are tens of reasonably independent studies that all conclude that the decrease in the average sales of, for instance, music or audiovisual published material has nothing to do with sharing between people. I believe there is one reason that has been completely overlooked and which is absolutely essential, is that in the digital world, you all know it, there are many more people who write, who take photographs, who shoot videos, who create games, and make them accessible to everybody, virtually at least, even though most contents might be read only by or viewed only by 5 persons. But in practice, you have, I quoted the figure about blogs because I think blogs are often overlooked since we had social networks, social media, because they are the one media that is most rooted in individual. That is, they are really an individual's home on the internet. And some people like me have several homes. Other invite people to visit their home and write on it. Some people have collective homes. But nonetheless, this notion of the home of a cultural producer or someone who has a public expression on the net is very important. And the number of live blogs, meaning blogs that were where a new post was done in the past month, has never stopped growing, even during the growth of Facebook, the explosive growth of Facebook. And you have 173 million last time Nielsen counted. And you'll know also that you have several hundred million short messages per day. Some people have tried to classify them, and of course they say that about 30% is small talk. But small talk is very important. Small talk is not to be discarded. It's a very important social construct. But many of them, there is a whole field, for example, called Twitterator, which is, and also a field of Twittopoetry, and actually it's important not so much as a cultural product, it's important because it signals that when people write tweets, that they work on what they are writing, how they write them. There is an attention to style, to form, and you quickly learn by feedback that it's important. So you have now 20% of Europeans aged 15, 16 or more. I don't know why the statistics are 16 or more, but it's who publish contents that are shared on the internet. So that means more than 100 million Europeans. And surprise, while this happens, at the same time, we have a new growth in cultural activities in the physical world. Cultural practices, playing a musical instrument, acting in theater, drawing, writing, things that are going to writing workshops, singing, dancing. And this is really amazing, maybe a coincidental, but this really, if you look at the curves of the statistics on this, 95, that is the time at which the web became a major platform for large groups of people, is the turning point. I'm not saying there is a causal element there. So how do the figure look in Europe? I said there were 20% of adults or contributing. I have tried to define a notion of serious efforts contributors. of course, it's totally vague, and so the figure you should take with an extreme caution. But these are people who spend time and energy, who consider that their content production on the net is an important part of their life, who will devote efforts to either form or contents. And also, these are people who say, this is taking me too much time. I would like to do things better, but I miss the time of doing it. Here, I estimated that would be 10% of the people who produce contents, but as I said, I have no clue because the notion of serious effort contributors is too vague for being measured. Now, there is something we sort of know, is how many people receive royalties over a 5-year period from the copyright system. And that's about a fifth of the serious effort contributors. And it would be a tenth if not for the private the levies for home copying that are distributed to many musical performers. Half of these people are musical performers who receive some small sums of money from the private levies. Now, the people who receive serious money from copyright systems, I mean minimum wage in a year. Yearly minimum wage in a year. How do we know? We know because we know how many people pay cotisation. I mean, how many people are registered for their pension on the income they receive from copyright and authors' rights, and that's a very small figure. And out of these, quite few people. For example, in France, it's 13,000 people. A tenth of them, that is 1,300 people, are capturing half of all the income from copyright that has been distributed to live authors or artists. What does it? Why do I deal in great detail with this? Because it tells us that whatever is the solution for sustaining a cultural economy where many, many people want to devote more time and energy to what they are producing in the digital world, doesn't lie probably in the part of a copyright system that is connected to private conception of cultural goods. This is a very important part. It will still be there. It will still serve the recognition of a number of successful authors and artists, but it's not going to be a solution for sustaining digital culture. So the challenge, as I describe it, is we must be able to recognize. I mean, recognize is attribute, recognize as valuable. It's symbolic. It's not financial. We must also be able to reward it. Why not everybody wants to be financially remunerated or rewarded for one's production on the net? There are many people who have other way of sustaining their existence and their activity. But for many people, and in particular for those who are less socially advantaged that someone like me can be, and as a consequence, much less free of how they allocate their time, having additional financial resources, whether to take, to take courses or to simply have more free time is important. And finally, it's good to have a word of sharing, but of course it's better if there are works to be shared. And some of the works, they take a serious investment before they can be shared. And so we need new sources to complement the existing ones to ensure that there will be support to the production of new works. And another aspect also is that in the digital world, filters or ex post filters or recommendation or valuation of production becomes essential. And for that, we need new forms of intermediaries. Here, I hope this is readable. Yeah, it looks it is. This is a very simplified view of all the major sources of financing to cultural activities. You see there are public subsidies, either direct or through statutes of activities, such as teachers, for example, play a major role. Actually, the size of a rectangle should be much bigger. 30% in the US, 50% in Latin European countries. You also have teaching as a private activity and many private services that are connected with cultural practices. You have public performance that has grown a lot since the digital world started making contents more accessible. It has grown for bad and good reason. The bad reasons is the monopoly of one firm globally on concert tours that has led to an incredible increase in the price of concert tickets. And so, but the good reason is that there is more audiences, and then you have what has been almost the only voice that was heard in policy debates. That is the people who sell and rent cultural goods, publishers, distributors. It's relatively recent that they account for something significant. It's about 120 years ago that it started. It's decreasing, but it's remaining overall. The macroeconomy of sales and rental of cultural goods has never stopped increasing at a slow pace. And finally, you have two new domains. The domains of the new intermediaries that help you search for contents, access them, that provide you means to share them, or that serve production. One of the reasons why many more people engage in production of audiovisual material, for example, is that you have wonderful digital cameras, even photo cameras, that are now affordable for a large share of the population. And then you have another thing, which was sort of unheard of in this particular domain, except through what was called the subscription model. That is when you could pre-order a book to make it possible for it to publish it. And that's resource pooling between individuals. And resource pooling has two forms: voluntary participative financing under the Kickstarter model. I don't know what is the most fashionable participative financing intermediary in Italy. Certainly not Kickstarter, because it's you have to be incorporated in the US. But Ulule is active, I think, also in Italy. KissKissBankBank is a French participative financing intermediary. And the achievement in a few years, the development of this form of support to cultural projects is quite amazing, actually, because we moved from a few $1,000s being the sum you could hope to get to, in some cases, several millions of dollars now. And the curve for European intermediaries is much lower, but there are real domains like documentaries, photo and video documentaries that are now basically at least innovative contents rests a lot on these new intermediaries. However, and it's too complex to explain for me to explain why. I believe there are serious issues of scale before this can be the one major scheme that enable what I call a many-to-all culture. That is a culture where many people really invest in producing contents and all of them can access them. And that's why I've suggested, and that will be the last part of my talk. Juan Carlos, you stop me when it's time. I suggested to organize a voluntary resource pooling, which I call the creative contribution, which looks a bit like some of the blanket licensing proposals that have been there for now 10 years to stop the war against piracy by replacing it by some financial scheme. But actually, I believe this proposal is significantly different because its real aim is digital culture. It's not saving the entertainment industry. It's not compensating the poor authors and artists of the harm caused by sharing, because I believe this harm is very relative, and many authors and artists actually are happy to see their work accessed, provided they can make a living, and by what, not necessarily all from their cultural activity, because actually very few of them live only from this, and I'm not even sure it's always what they desire, but some of them do desire it. So what is the creative contribution? If you describe being a matter of fact without hiding the unpleasant aspects, the unpleasant aspect is that every household with a broadband internet connection, I mean a real one, I mean I think a number of broadband connection in Italy do not qualify. A real one meaning one with which you can upload significant contents. All of them would have to pay by law a statutory and obligatory contribution. Sorry, and this contribution, it would be used about 2/3 or a bit little less than 2/3 to reward digital works that have been shared. To reward the contributors to digital works that have been shared, and the rest to finance production of projects and the environment of creation. And of course, this is, you can start speaking of this only if you start by recognizing the right to non-market sharing. Because of course, there are many policymakers who dream of creating the compulsory contribution without giving the right to sharing. This is for advocates and for activists, it's the kind of a nightmare scenario because then you will kill the willingness to pool resources forever. Philosophically, it's very important. The creative contribution is not based on copyright because I do believe, and I think one day we will get it recognized, that the copyright has nothing to say, just like it had nothing to say in the past, about what individuals do with works that are in their possession. This is just a matter of a fundamental cultural right that you can transmit it to someone else, that you can share it. And of course, this right needs to be reformulated in the digital world. It needs to be extended to include the right to copy, but it needs also, in my opinion, to be restricted in the sense that it can be restricted to non-commercial acts without losing the cultural benefits. Why? Because 30% of the internet population shares works without it being a commercial activity. They pay for it. They pay with buying computers, buying connectivity, but they pay a little, and then that's enough to enable peer-to-peer sharing. And actually, content lobbies have issued a very interesting study. Sometimes they are their best enemies, and they published a study showing that in the US, since there was so much war against peer-to-peer sharing, now 70% of sharing occurs outside of any network, only by USB key swapping and other similar mechanisms, which you can fight only with one cop behind every kid. Philosophically, if it is not copyright-based, what is the case for making a compulsory contribution? And I suggest to base it on the Declaration of Social Rights among a community of peers, that is users and producers of digital culture. So I already said that I switch it. Which work could be shared? All media, because of course if you leave one out, for example, ebooks, you say, oh no, not ebooks, then the war against piracy or sharing will go on just for the benefit of this one, and all the benefits of the rest will be very much diluted. It should also include voluntarily shared works, such as works licensed under Creative Commons licenses, because it would be an incredible thing that those people who initially wanted to recognize the right to share would be the only one not to be rewarded for their works. And, but it is triggered by the fact that the work is digitally distributed to the public. That is, there is a part of moral rights for the lawyers here, which is called the divulgation right. It's for an author to decide when a work will be made public in any form. I suggest to create a digital publication divulgation right. So people could decide, oh, you know, this internet, I don't want to live there. I mean, it's that's fine with me. I mean, I believe it's a real. I really believe. I respect that even, but also it enables if we recognize this separation between the analog and the digital world, this need to jump for the person who authors the work to jump from one to the other. An advantage is enables a form of chronology of media, which is very important for the transition. For example, you can have theater viewing of films, and camcording is not authorized. And then you can have digital publication that is VOD, and that triggers the right to share. And then later you can have TV screening of movies, because actually there is no contradiction between a work being previously shared and it being shown on screen. So I'm done. How much basically it turns around the figure of 4 to 5 in developed countries. 4 to 5 euro per month per household represents sort of 2.5 to 4% of cultural consumption of household. So it's not going to eat all the cultural spending of households. It represents maybe in some cases 10% of the cultural consumption of the most disadvantaged households. But it provides them with so much benefit in terms of cultural access that I don't know if it should be socially. What will it give? It will give an complementary income to a large number of people and a significant income to a small number of people. And so don't believe it's going with 4% of the cultural consumption of households. You're not going to give the minimum wage to everybody. Huh? I mean, well, that has to be very clear. It's going, the average here is something, I think I have something like, if you take the case of France, I'm sorry, I didn't do the computation with the models, but the models are on my site, and you can, on the site of the book, and you can run them for Italy. It takes time to tune the parameters using statistics. But the average would be €525 per year. But actually, most people would receive much less than that. And for many people, maybe for here 1 million people, it would be purely symbolic in the sense, but symbolic recognition is important. Last thing is that all data would be provided by contributors. The contributors, people who pay, that is internet users. But here it's the individuals, it's not the household. Either they would allocate it using their preferences to projects and intermediaries for support to production, or they would provide voluntary data about usage in the public sphere. What I call usage in the public sphere is if I include some piece of music on a blog piece, it's an usage in a public sphere. If I share on a public peer-to-peer network before, if there is no warfare against peer-to-peer, it is also an usage in the public sphere. But if I listen to something at it's none of anyone's business if I listen 10 times to a totally stupid music singer, which I do. So you have more information, and I stop here to leave time for 1 or 2 questions. My apologies for having not more time for interaction.
Ci sono delle domande per Philippe Grain? Potete farle anche in italiano, le traduciamo, nessun problema. Sì, prego.
Credo che... Posso parlare francese o italiano?
Sì.
Italiano va bene, se non capisco.
Più che altro per i traduttori, infatti.
Grazie, ma una domanda molto semplice. Lei ha esordito dicendo che quello che le interessava maggiormente era lo human development. Io volevo chiederle se non pensa che ci sia però un vero e proprio gap generazionale per lo human development. Se ne parla molto, c'è un dibattito in corso, però non si sa mai fino a che punto le persone possano essere discriminate in base alla loro età, in base alla loro generazione di appartenenza, perché in questa fascia, diciamo, non si fruisce neanche più di teaching, di veri e propri programmi di insegnamento e di diciamo reintroduzione al media, al social media, eccetera, no? In quanto tutti i programmi educativi riguardano sia il master per la gioventù sia l'università per la terza età, diciamo, ma c'è una fascia intermedia forse, no? Che potrebbe ancora accedere, magari dire la propria e poter fruire di questi, che non ha però, che sta in una zona d'ombra. Ecco, io volevo chiederle proprio solo questo, e se c'è una qualche, se si può envisager, diciamo, no? Se si può envisager per il futuro prossimo una qualche area che contempli questi individui, che sono tanti.
Grazie.
Yeah, Thank you very much. Actually, I believe we have two problems. We have one, the generational problem is hard, but at least it has a nice property. It's going to disappear in the sense that many more people, you know, I will soon be retired. I mean, I run participative democracy sites. Now we have a big problems to stop the 70 years old from occupying all the debate space because they have lots of time. They know so the generational gap is something that slowly disappears. Then we have an educational problem. A problem in media and social process literacy, which you refer to, I think also. And this one, the real problem is, you know, I coined, but then I found many other people had done it before me. That's life on the internet. I coined the expression digital orphans to replace digital natives. Because I believe digital natives, you know, 100 years from now, everybody will be a digital native. But the situation we have today is we have a huge population of digital orphans, that is people who have grown up with the digital world, while their teachers, their parents, anybody who had a tutorial role towards them were totally unaware of this digital world, unable to give them guidance or advice, or and in many cases even unable to learn from them. So this is really a problem we have today, is that our policymakers are still from this, the parents of digital orphans, and the real question is, I'm a bit despairing to educate these what I would say, these bad parents, but clearly that's part of Juan Carlos' role in defining the role of education and universities in the digital world. I think we really have, schools have failed tragically, because there was a significant minority of teachers who wanted to embrace this new word, but they were very much dissuaded by the bureaucratic organization of the school systems from doing it, and the educational system still thought about educational resources, but there is no such thing as an educational resources. There are educational practices, there are educational processes, there are it's a big challenge, yeah, and it's not going to be solved by the proposal I've described here, but everybody can work on it. But meanwhile, you know, it created a space. You know, for example, we have absolutely no teaching of creative writing in France. There was a sort of social correction to that, is that we have an explosion of writing workshops in the back rooms of cafes and bookstores. It's great, but it would be better that the school catches back.
Ancora una domanda, che poi dobbiamo lasciare la sala all'evento successivo, prego. Ok, se non ci sono domande, I thank our speaker again. Thank you so much for your lecture. Thank you.